All right, let's talk types of rest. So we are doing a series here all about rest. And in the first video, we talked, it was a little bit more of a pep talk, a little bit maybe tough love about how important rest is and how you need to rest. And I dropped a stat on you in that video. That is, I learned from the book Burnout, which I said in that video is not my favorite book from like a flow standpoint, but there's some really great takeaways from that book. One of which is that we as humans, and this is based on some data, study, science, need 10 hours of rest on average per day. 10 hours. And that includes sleep. So if you're sleeping 8-9 hours a night, then on top of that, you need an additional 1 to 2 hours of rest per day. And I know what you're thinking, Laken, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. Time is precious, time is valuable, it is. And I don't have time for 1 to 2 hours of rest per day. But let's talk about the different types of rest, and maybe you will see how you can incorporate some rest and how you maybe already are incorporating rest in your day. So when it comes to rest, I want you to imagine this grid. And we have 4 different types, like 4 different quadrants. So across the top, we have short-term rest and we have long-term rest. So short-term rest is something that you're doing for a short amount of time. There is no right or wrong answer here. I'm not gonna give you like, it's anything less than 30 minutes. You know what is short-term for you versus what is long-term. But when we're talking about short-term types of rest, we're talking about focusing on that relaxed state, right? We are trying to unwind. We are trying to relax. This is something that you also probably need more frequently, right? Short-term rest, we're gonna need on a more regular basis. Again, the amount of time is gonna differ for different people, what you have time to incorporate in your life, but that's what we're talking about when we say short-term rest. Long-term rest, we're focusing on the recharge. We're focusing on really like rebooting. What do you need when you need to unplug completely? And I don't even mean like actually unplugging from technology, even though I think that's a big component for us as humans to be able to rest. But I mean like when your computer needs to be unplugged and rebooted, that's the long-term rest for you as a human. When you take extended time, right, extended vacations, I also consider sleep, right, a long-term reboot. Then along this side of our little chart here, we have physical rest and we have mental rest. So physical rest is pretty obvious, right? We're resting our physical body. We're sitting still. We are not really doing much to exert. Your heart rate is in its like resting state, whatever your resting heart rate is on a regular basis, right? You're not exerting extra energy. And this is gonna look different for different people, right? For some people, if you're sitting at a desk all day, you might not need any really additional physical rest because you're getting a lot of that on a regular basis. When I worked full-time as an actuary, most of my day was physical rest, right? Now, until standing desk started to become a thing, once I started to move up a little bit and I went to more meetings, those take a little bit more, right? If you're somebody who's in meetings all day, talking to me, and like filming a video like this, if I'm sitting at my desk, let me talk me specifically. If I'm sitting at my desk editing a video, that's physical rest. Like I'm not exerting myself physically. If I'm filming a video, that is not physical rest, okay? Most of the time my ring thinks I'm doing a workout when I film a video. It's like, your heart rate was elevated. Were you working out? I'm like, no, I was just recording a video. That is not physical rest. So depending on what you do, you may get some physical rest just in your regular day-to-day life. And then mental is obvious, and the one I think we forget about a lot, and that is being able to turn off your brain. Now, I know that's hard, okay? We're gonna talk about some specific examples here that you might need in order to be able to physically turn your brain off. But it is your mind being able to rest, which, like I talked about in the last video, given all the information that we are getting on a daily basis from the entire world, it is really tough sometimes to be able to turn off our mind, and we need that kind of mental rest. What I also encourage you to think about when it comes to mental rest is, what do you need a mental break from? Because for some people, it's going to be a mental break from their job, from their day-to-day work. For some people, it's going to be a mental break from parenting. For some people, it's going to be a mental break from the internet, from the news. For some people, it's a mental break from being social and being on. Every human is different, and everybody's mental load is different. And so what you need a mental break from is going to be different than what I need a mental break from. So we're gonna talk about examples that fall into each of these quadrants. These are just some ideas. These are some things that I do, and I would love to hear ideas that you have, because I know that there are some different ideas and different things that people do that could fall into any one of these. Now, there are gonna be some that also overlap, right? That are going to count in multiple categories, and we'll talk about that. I could make this super complicated and have it like Venn diagram style. We're not getting that detailed, okay? We're goal setters, not scientists. Okay, so let's start with short-term physical rest. So again, this might not be something that you feel like you need, but let's say you're a teacher, right? And you are on your feet all day. This looks like you sitting down for 15 minutes during your lunch break and not moving around physically, like just sitting down and being able to take a break. And I know that that sounds silly, because you're like, well, of course I'm gonna sit down and eat lunch. Teachers, tell me how many times you have like run to the other side of the school to grab something, or you have helped another teacher hang up a bulletin board during your break, or XYZ. Like there are so many things you probably do during your break that you may not actually sit down to take a break. But a short-term physical rest is like literally you are in the middle of physical exertion and you're stopping to take a break. This is gonna be extra important if you are somebody who is in a physical job. This is also something that I need now, being pregnant. Like this, when I'm not pregnant, this is not a category that I really feel like I need to operate in, right? Like I can function my day-to-day without taking a physical break. Nowadays, that's not the case. If I'm like cleaning or tidying up, I have to stop and take a break. If we're going for a long walk, I have to stop and take a break. I have to stop and take a physical break. You might find that this category isn't something that you need, or you might find that this category is something that's important to you. Next category is long-term physical rest. Now, same thing applies here. If you are somebody who is not on your feet a whole lot, this might be something that you don't really feel like you need. But I also think what falls into this category is taking rest days from working out, right? So instead of working out 7 days a week, which is a lofty goal in and of itself if it's something that you are trying, but in general, most trainers that I have ever met would not recommend that you work out 7 days a week. They would recommend that you take a day off. So in my mind, a long-term physical break is like taking a day off of working out, right? Giving your body a rest day from purposeful movement. It also might look like if you have a really physical demanding job that you incorporate long-term physical rest over the weekend, right? Or whatever your days off look like. If you are a doctor or a nurse, right? And you work a 12-hour shift where you are constantly on your feet and you are moving from one patient to the other and the nurse's station and then back again and all the places, on your days off, you probably need to incorporate a little bit more long-term physical rest. I'm not saying this because it feels obvious sometimes when I say things, but then I always know there's somebody that's like, wow, thank you for just like saying it that way. I want you to not feel bad about that. I want you to acknowledge I spend all this time on my feet, go, physically exerting myself. So I need a longer, recharging, rebooting physical break on my days off. And that's okay. All right, next one is short-term mental breaks. These to me are the one that I need to incorporate more on a regular basis, because if I just wait until the end of the day to try to get more of a mental break, I'm more likely to get frustrated at some point in my day. And the other key to this for me is not letting it just be scrolling Instagram. I've been there, right? I consider like my I'm gonna take 5 minutes and scroll Instagram. And sometimes that's what we need, okay? Sometimes that's what we need. But most of the time you're adding more information into your brain that it's not actually a mental break. It might be a mental break from what you were working on, right? If I'm editing a video, but if I'm staring at a screen editing a video, my mental break would probably be beneficial to not be looking at a screen, right? And to do something else. Let's talk about mental breaks in general. It's really hard to turn your brain off. And so you're going to have to figure out what activities help you turn off your brain. The question I want you to think about is, what are you doing when you lose track of time, right? You get so enthralled in something that you're not thinking about anything else. Now, sometimes that's easier said than done, right? Like think about when you go into a movie theater and you are just forced to you turn your phone off and you sit there and you watch the movie. And that is a mental break. Now, sometimes your brain still might wander and whatever, but most of the time you can kind of turn your brain off. The other thing I want you to think about is taking a mental break doesn't have to mean you're also taking a physical break, right? For some people, working out is a mental break. It's not for me. I'm not the kind of person that like my brain turns off when I'm working out. If that's you, that's awesome. That totally counts, right? As a mental break. For me, it doesn't really work, but I try to do things like reading is a good one. Yep, watching TV shows, that's a good one for me too. Honestly, sometimes just being with my daughter and like playing with her is a really good mental break. Again, when it comes back to the question, what do you need a mental break from? If you need a mental break from my work stuff, right? Being with my daughter is a mental break from work. But then, yes, I will admit that I also need sometimes a mental break from being a parent, but it depends on how much time I spent doing either thing that day, right? Days like today where she's in daycare most of the day, I don't have the mental load of being a parent right now. And not that I don't think about her, obviously. I'm definitely thinking about her, especially when they send me pictures all day long. But I'm not thinking about what to feed her today. I'm not thinking about how much longer until her nap, etc. Right? Daycare took that load today. So on days like this, I don't really need a mental break from being a parent. But when I spend the entire day working on days like today and my brain is operating overtime thinking about you and your goals and all the things, then I do need a mental break, and she can act as that. When she gets home, our walk home, my walk to get her from daycare is like mental break number one. And I've been trying to listen to more music while I walk. I think it's just better for me than like listening to a podcast or YouTube video. And then when I pick her up and chatting with her while we walk home, especially now that she's getting so big, like that's a mental break for me. So you have to figure out what helps you turn your brain off. And it may take a little bit of thinking to figure that out, and we're all going to be different in what helps you turn off your brain. But again, those short-term mental breaks really is just like in the middle of the day, like taking a little bit of a quick mental break from whatever it is that you're doing. And then obviously a longer mental break to me is like the hour in the evening that I have to unwind after she goes to bed to literally do whatever I want. Most of the time right now, it's just binging a show. Sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's chatting with my husband, but then we're talking about something and I'm turning my brain off from something else. Also, going on vacation. That could count as both a physical and mental break. Kind of depends on what kind of vacationer you are, right? If you go to like a beach and you lay on a beach, that may be both a physical and a mental long-term recharge. But if you're somebody who like goes to Europe and gets 20,000 steps in a day, right? That's not really a physical break, but it could be a really good mental break for you. Sometimes the longer ones are a little bit harder to schedule, but I think you can see, hopefully with all these examples, how quickly it can add up to be close to that 10 hours a day, especially when you factor in the one I haven't talked about yet, which is sleep. Now sleep, I would put smack dab in the middle, right? It is all these things. It is physical, it is mental, it is, well, I guess I wouldn't put it in short term, but it's long term for sure, right? In an ideal world, we're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, quality, deep sleep. Well, I guess it's not all sleep. I use my Oura Ring to track my sleep. I love this thing for tracking my sleep. But right now, I don't get any deep sleep. I have not had a sleep score in the 90s since getting pregnant. It doesn't mean I'm not in that bed for 10 hours. I'm looking at my bed right now. Like, I am. My daughter sleeps and I like am in bed for most of that same time. I usually, again, take an hour to unwind and then the rest of it I am trying to sleep. But between getting up to go to the bathroom and the lack of deep sleep, my sleep score has been on the lower side. It is what it is. That's a phase of life that I'm in, but I am constantly working towards improving my sleep because that is a big component. That's a big component of getting that 10 hours on average a day. So those are my suggestions and those are my categories of the types of rest. Again, I don't take credit for coming up with the types of rest, but what I did try to do is I took everything I read about types of rest kind of, to me, felt like it was overcomplicating it. And there were like a lot of different components and I tried to simplify it, at least in my mind, what was simplifying it. And hopefully you can figure out which one of these quadrants do you feel like you need more, like you need to be implementing more of that type of rest and coming up with ideas for each of them for you individually, right? Does working out, where does that fall for you? Does, maybe it's keeping your hands busy so you can't grab your phone, right? Is it coloring? Is it painting? Is it doing some sort of like cross stitching or needlepoint? There are so many options and it could fit into different categories depending on who you are. So I would love to hear down in the comments an idea of one of the categories for yourself and like which category, or if you need help, let us know and we will try to come up with some ideas together. And that is it for my types of goal ideas. The next video, stay tuned, subscribe, because the next video will be about implementing and actually finding time to implement these types of rests. Goal, excuse me. Like, that's probably not true.